welcome, folksy folks, to Fabric of Folklore podcast. I am Vanessa Y. Rogers, and this is the podcast where we unravel the mysteries of folklore. One of the reasons I started this podcast is because I am a travel bug, except that traveling isn't happening as much since I've had children. But I don't just love going to new places to visit the tourist attractions. I love learning about the people, the history, and how the geography molds the people's customs and traditions. For example, an island in the Philippines, Camp Come Again, is the only island on the planet with more volcanoes than towns. But because they are dormant, it's a popular tourist destination. And as you might imagine, the volcanoes on the island have shaped their culture. The locals even speak about the volcanoes with reverence and a fondness. And that is essentially what this podcast is about. It is an we are attempting to understand folklore to get at the roots of a culture. We're learning what it means to be human on this podcast. So if that sounds like a podcast you want to continue to listen to, make sure you hit that subscribe button, whether you're watching on YouTube or you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform. So you make sure to get our notifications every week when the podcast drops. Our show is going to be a captivating show today. We'll be discussing storytelling, the benefits both for the immigrant experience, but also as a medical tool. We'll explore the bilingual storytelling and how the tradition of oral storytelling is changing. Jasmine Storyteller is a Lebanese-Australian from Sydney, Australia. She comes from a multilingual and multi-faith family. She is a domestic violence worker, writer, educator, and oral bilingual storyteller and performer. She is currently studying in creative arts and health and well-being after originally working in journalism and public relations. However, she's changing her career to storytelling, arts, and psychology. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us, Jasmine.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much. And it's a pleasure to meet you, Vanessa.
And can you tell us a little bit about your story about the daughter of an immigrant from a multi-faith household?
I am pretty blessed. I feel like I'm in a unique position that I was born in a very multicultural and linguistic area of Sydney called Fairfield, which is one
Mm,
of the most diverse communities in Australia, where there are over 60 languages. And so I
that's
feel
amazing.
very honored that I grew up in a household where it felt very normal.
Mm,
And that bubble was just to be feel included and to embrace the diversity of my family with very different languages spoken and cultures through food and language. And that in itself is just a very unique experience. But growing up, I didn't feel any different because I always flew under the radar, I guess. People
mm,
just thought automatically she's Lebanese, but nobody actually thought to stop and ask me what I am, who I am,
mm-hmm.
and my upbringing. But my grandfather, bless his soul, was the one who just constantly told me that we're human beings, we all bleed the same, and we should treat everyone equally. So I'm very honored and grateful for that.
That's beautiful. So your parents, though, they weren't born in Australia. Is that right?
No, they were both born in Lebanon,
Hmm.
got married, and just came to Australia. And just we just had a perfect, it just feels like a normal upbringing because in Lebanon, it is very common to hear, see, and know of families who are married to different religions and interfaith and speak many different languages. But it's not just in Lebanon. There are other countries as well, such as in South Africa, and in African countries and in Asian countries and in South American countries where just you find people and hear about it that they're interfaith marriages and it's just like a normal upbringing. So
Yeah.
yeah.
How do the schools handle having so many different languages coming in? Because I'm from Texas, and so the primary other language that we hear is Spanish. And so they have like people who come in who like help the Spanish speakers kind of assimilate to English. But I would imagine with, you know, in your situation where there's 60 languages spoken in a small region, it would be harder to find like help for every student speaking different languages.
So I was born in like southwestern Sydney, but with my upbringing, I had family friends that were scattered in different areas of Sydney. So in the eastern suburbs and in the south suburbs of Sydney. But my parents chose to put me in a public school system. So there was just different nationalities and languages that were changed, interchangeable. And in high school, my parents asked me if I wanted to go to a private Catholic school, and I said no bluntly. I chose to go for a public education. And I'm glad I did, because at the end of the day, you know, a child chooses the way they want to further their studies. And
Mhm.
it's based on how their parents have raised them.
Now, I know that different immigrant families handle moving to different countries in different ways, and some really want their children to hold on to their traditions, and others really want their children to be more, or in my case, American, but in your case, it would be Australian. How did your parents handle the assimilation?
Um, Honestly, when I grew up through like primary school and high school, I didn't wear a headscarf. I've only been wearing a headscarf the past 6 years. So
Mm.
I embraced both, both being Australian and Lebanese. But as a child growing up, I was always a geography buff, and I was always fascinated about different languages and cultures. And I always held on to that. And then when I left high school, it was there and there where I started to experience both direct and indirect um, comments about the color of my skin, my nationality. But at the same time, I best describe myself as my mind is Australian, my heart is Lebanese, and my soul is an eclectic taste of different styles of music, because I listen to different genres of music and different languages. So that's how I put myself as a citizen of the world who loves to explore. And I do that through storytelling. And I feel that that's where my uniqueness of my faith and family and can be presented through storytelling.
Well, I love that you really embrace that because I know that for some people, they can feel very torn. Like they have a foot in both worlds, but don't feel like they belong in either one. But it sounds like you've really taken that on as an identity for yourself, as this is who you are. You are a little bit of everything, and you're okay with that. That just sounds wonderful. So well balanced.
Well, it takes a very long time. It took a lot of strength and courage, because as an oral bilingual and storyteller performer, my best friend at the time told me, because I was very shy and timid at the time, they told me, I wish you would show the world what I see. And I was very fortunate that I took that on board and I started to embrace my uniqueness, my learning a second language and other multiple languages that I grew up with that I lost, but I'm relearning now
Mm,
as an adult. And I see that as a superpower and a strength, and we should pass that on to children and young people.
absolutely. What are the languages that you grew up with that you are having to relearn?
So when I was growing up, Turkish, Italian, Spanish, Russian were very common languages, and of course Arabic. Um, and there's also different dialects to Arabic as well. So you've got the Egyptian dialect, you've got the Lebanese dialect, you've got the Syrian dialect, and you've got the Qatari dialect and the UAE. So it's endless. So you can think of Arabic language as the Shakespearean version of Arabic, and then you have the Lebanese Arabic. But I mainly grew up with the Lebanese dialect and
Mhm.
the Egyptian dialect because I watched a lot of black and white films that were mainly produced in Egypt, which is like the Hollywood version of the Arab world.
Wow. How did your parents speak that many languages?
Yeah, and I also have family that reside in different countries as well. And so I learnt in school Italian, Spanish as well. And I listened to a lot of Spanish music with different genres and different accents. Turkish, I just lost it, but it's it's a beautiful language, but I'm really currently drawn now to the Russian and Spanish, Italian language, and now I'm trying to teach myself how to read and write in Arabic, which as an adult is not very easy.
Yeah, tell us about how it's different than English writing and reading.
Cool. So we write from left to right, and
Right.
then you've and so as I was telling you, you've got formal Arabic, and then you have formal Arabic, and then you have informal Arabic. But as someone who grew up with the Lebanese dialect, Lebanese people are known to like speak with 3 or 4 languages. So we speak the Arabic, English, and French, and we mix those languages in together. So I think it's pretty cool that I can get away with that when I'm doing like a storytelling performance. Like, yep, I'm Lebanese by heritage. I can get away with that with my twang, and if you like it or not, accept it.
I love that you're blending it in with your storytelling. That's really beautiful. Is does Arabic have a letter system like English does?
Yes, so the A, B, C, D, and then we have Aleph, Bet, Ses, Shib, He. And so, yeah, but the challenging part is not the individual letters, it's the fact that you've got the A, E, I, O, U, and then you have letters that you have to add on top of an A. And if you mispronounce that, it could change the whole sentence. The one word could change the whole sentence
Oh.
around. And so you have to be very careful with how you say it and how you write it. So I'm just like at a way beginner language, like a baby just learning how to read and
Hmm.
write.
But it sounds like you have a proclivity for language. You have an ability to pick up language pretty
Yes,
easily.
I do because I learn by ear. So when I perform my stories or I'm listening to music, I write poetry. And so when I write my stories, whether it's the help of my mom or not, I always learn by ear. And that's how I just pick it up. And I always hear a beat in
Mm.
my ears. And even when I write, I just hear a beat and it just comes off the page. And when I perform, you can see that rhythm and that beat just bringing the story to life.
So tell us about this. You had a recent uh, career change into storytelling. You weren't always a storyteller as a profession, is that right?
Yes, that's correct. I was originally a public relations consultant and journalist for 5 years. And
Hmm.
then I changed my career into education. I was studying learning difficulties for young children, primary age.
Hmm.
And then at the time, I was volunteering with the local council, was called Paint the Town Red. And my manager at the time approached me and asked, would you be interested in a storytelling course that's for free, and can you speak another language? Once again, I flew under the radar not knowing that I can speak another language. And I
Hmm.
said, yeah, why not, and I'm down for that. And fast forward to where I am now, and yeah, I'm a bilingual storyteller, and I also work with domestic and family violence as well on the side.
Oh, so you do that on the side, the domestic violence work on the side?
Yes, yeah, so storytelling is a side hustle. So I would love that to be my
Mm.
full-time career. But I want to be known as first and foremost as a storyteller and writer.
So what do you feel like spoke to you about storytelling? I'm assuming you took the storytelling class. What really spoke to you about it?
Oh wow, that that could be an hour within itself. Really, it's to embrace my individuality and my roots and my heritage, and I guess it's to honor my younger child self. to make them proud that I I don't want that child, that younger version of me, to hide away their identity. And even when I got older and I left high school, um, I experienced a lot of indirect comments. And at one point, it just made me feel insecure about who I am, and it made me question a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
But storytelling um, is not just an emotional and deep level with human connection. It's about diversity and inclusion, and that's what I strongly believe with my current storytelling, Beau Petits Enfants, is that we should be celebrating diversity and inclusion. And I want to bring that upbringing into my storytelling performances, and I want to share that not just as an emotional connection with storytelling, but to share stories that I have personally read myself, but also the popular stories of original oral storytelling through popular Arabic folk tales and fairy tales, and to hone that and honor that, and to share that with the rest of the world, because it's unfortunate that storytelling is dying, and especially oral storytelling, it's
Mm-hmm.
dying. And sometimes through my personal experience, I've performed to newly arrived refugees and migrants who unfortunately have left war-torn countries out of their control. And some of those things you just upleave and go. And as I said, it's out of your control. And sometimes you lose your identity when you're in a new country,
Mm.
in an unfamiliar space. And what I want to do is I can't heal everyone. But when children come from places of trauma and PTSD, I want to create a space that is safe and welcoming, and especially with most of the newly arrivals. I speak Arabic, so I perform to Syrians, Palestinians. Sometimes I fled from Lebanon and from Syria. And so I want to show them that as a first generation Lebanese um, person who comes from a multi-faith and multilingual family, that there are people who care about you. And if I can do that, I can do that through my storytelling um, stories, even if it's with a humor to make you forget about what exists or what had happened, but
Mm-hmm.
to honor your story and to know where you came from and how far you have come from, because storytelling and the art of storytelling is beautiful.
So tell us about your program that I okay, Beau Petit Zafant. Is that how you say it?
Close enough,
Close enough.
properties
I
enfants.
do not have an ear for language. I, I find that it's so sad. Americans in general, we don't. Most English speakers, we don't have to learn other languages, and so like it's just not ingrained in us. But I feel like if we were to start learning it at young ages, it would be much easier to pick these things up. But my pronunciation of any other language, even English words, is often atrocious. So excuse my butchering of the French language. But can you tell us about your storytelling program?
So with my storytelling program, I offer um, creative art programs, using different forms of art with newly arrived refugees and children, or even with schools and in libraries. And I allow both children who are non-English speakers or English speakers, or children who come from an English who speak more than 2, 3 languages, and I offer them different storytelling sessions, and I might offer them first 20 to 30 minutes of a story that I have shared, and then I give that child or children the chance to write their own story and share that. And I give the child the opportunity to express themselves and not to make them feel confined or put them in a box. I give them that outlet of them to selectively choose what kind of art they want to, of course, in a safe environment, to show them that you can choose whatever way you want to express yourself, whether it is through writing a theatre play and performing it outside in nature, or to, how am I getting an example? Another thing would be to your teachers or to your parents, or to record it and put it up onto the school website. It's just allowing that child to know, especially from a very young age, that you are given a choice and you can use that, and how that the story is structured, who is the protagonist, and makes them allow them to think of the language skills that they can share with other people. But also, it's going back to celebrating diversity and inclusion, to also think about their peers and students. There might be a child or children in the classroom who could be deaf or could be blind in a mainstream school. And so we need to cater to children with visible disabilities, but there are also children who do have invisible disabilities that we don't know about. They could have a learning difficulty or a learning disability. And we want to make sure that we can cater to how we might use our sensory experience, or how we use our auditory experience, or how we interact with the audience. Because when you give child from a very young age, especially with storytelling and the art of storytelling, you're teaching them that not only how to learn how to read, write, and write stories, but to actively listen, but also crucial verbal and non-verbal skills that they can take with them, not just as a life skill, but they can take with them into the next stage, especially with language learning. Even if someone is not a English is their first language, they can learn through their peers what the cultural differences are, and to embrace that. And with storytelling as a workshop, you're encouraging children from a very young age. Yes, I have a superpower. I can speak a language. And the person maybe of a different faith or different culture is like, hey, I can speak a language too. We're heroes. And they can share that with their peers, and to embrace that individuality, but also as a community and as a whole.
Mm-hmm. So when you're doing your bilingual storytelling or trilingual or however many languages you're including, does everybody in the audience have those languages, or do they sometimes not speak some Arabic and you're still throwing in some French or Italian in there as well? How does that work?
So beforehand, when I'm booked for a performance, I will always ask questions and take into consideration what is the age group, will parents be there? And most of the time, there are Arabic storytellers. Sometimes there are Arabic speakers
Mm-hmm.
of first, second, or third generation, but sometimes there's not. There are many experiences through moments through my storytelling where I performed with a Spanish bilingual storyteller, and there were no Arabic speakers. And so I just jumped into the deep end and I used my Spanish, my broken Spanish, and I did really well. And I received positive feedback for that. Another moment where I performed for newly arrived refugees and migrant children was back in 2019, which was my first ever gig at a school. And most of them all spoke Arabic. And so I used that opportunity to speak Arabic, and I had children correct me while I was using the language. And then another time when I was performing at the SSI New Beginnings Festival, that's where I used my Spanish storytelling skills. But there have been there have been many scenarios where I have incorporated many different languages, and I always ask the audience what language they speak. So I always make sure that they're included in the audience, because sometimes the event manager or coordinator can't tell me exactly what's gonna happen,
Yeah.
because every storytelling experience is different. And I live by the motto, expect the unexpected, and you just got to go with the flow and live unexpectedly with each performance. But I've been fortunate enough that every performance has gone well, and hearing children and parents repeat the words, the phrases in Arabic, and also asking them their phrases as well, or words in their language. And I include that too. And
Mm.
so it's that two-way street where you're seeing that interaction. It's like, see, I can include your languages as well. I'm not just a bilingual storyteller. I include that multilingual facility.
Do you think that you could give us an example of a story? Like it just maybe not even it doesn't necessarily have to be a full one, but like a snippet of one where you include a little bit of different languages. I would love to hear a story.
Okay. Um, the first thing that I can think of is like, um, oh my God, this is on the spot. I can only think of the Arabic and the English right now.
Do you want to come back to it and while you're thinking about it?
Yep,
Okay.
sure.
Um, so earlier you talked about the art of oral storytelling is dying. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So the art of oral storytelling, we know that storytelling through stories that was heard to us, was taught to us from such a young age, through our parents, grandparents, and popular stories, even if it's not Nasreddin or Alauddin or Ali Baba and the Thousand Thieves.
Hmm.
And is it Ali Baba and the Thousand Thieves? Just
I
like I need
think, yeah, I think so.
or
Yes.
A Thousand and One Nights. It's just the perfect example that I can think of is that when children or parents leave a war-torn country, you're leaving everything behind and you don't want to, but you want to provide your children with a better opportunity. And it's losing that identity, that sense of identity, not even if it's not through stories told through your parents, even like close-knit communities, whether you come from a village or a city, it's hearing those stories shared by older relatives or our elders. And even now, just for example, being a first generation Australian, I'm fortunate enough that my grandparents did teach me stories and proverbs and popular stories. But there are some people who are probably second or third generation born in different countries and they don't know their heritage and they
Mhm.
lose that. And I know a lot of friends and family friends who are trying to find out their ancestry so they can reconnect with that root with their roots.
Mhm.
And that's how oral storytelling is dying because those stories are not passed on. Yeah, sure, we can learn stories through the modern day of technology and we
Mhm.
can produce different stories, whether it's through videos or photo essay and post them up on blogs and websites and on social media. But the true, authentic feeling of oral storytelling is knowing it's that true basis. It's like having that experience. It's like my grandmother told me that story, and I can share that story with my children and my grandchildren, or even just like a random person that you might bump into but you never see them again. You can share that story with them and say, "This is the art of storytelling, and this is what I learned as a child." Even through my personal experience, when people ask me, what do you do? I don't tell them I work in domestic and family violence. The first two things that I say is I'm a storyteller and I'm a writer. And the first thing is, you're a storyteller. That's a very unique job. What do you do? Do you tell stories to people in library? I'm like, no, I try and bring back and keep the art of oral storytelling back again. And then they go, that's pretty cool. You don't see that as a thing these days. So
Mhm.
yeah.
When it used to be so common to have like a town storyteller, and that's just how people would tell stories. Yeah. You mentioned, I think one of the ones that you sent me a few articles, and one of them was about Nasreddin stories, where um, and I think there was a group of refugees who were having to leave. Um is that what you were talking about earlier? Is that a lot of the refugees that you work with?
Yes, yes and no. Some of them are not published articles because we need to keep some of the children's identity um, personal and private for safety reasons.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, I do use a lot of Nasreddin stories and a lot of Arabic folk tales and fairy tales, stories that they grew up with, to embrace the morals of the stories and to make them reconnect and stay connected with their heritage, because Nasreddin stories were very popular in Arabic countries and in Turkey, and at some stage with Persia as well.
What is, I'm not familiar with that term, Nasruddin stories. What are those?
So Nasreddin stories are just different types of stories that are full of morals, and they teach children about. I can give you an example. There are some
Okay.
Nasreddin stories that talks about strength, humor, treating people equally. Um, there are, with a lot of Nasreddin stories, I could be here all day, but I would keep it in a nutshell. There's just Nasreddin stories are full of morals that we can teach children or adults and at any age. So, how to treat people respectfully, how to share, how to be good, how to identify the injustice that's in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and even like with Chinese folk tale stories and fairy tales, it's how to respect your elders, how to respect individual characteristics of certain cultures and your value. And that shares a lot of similarities to Arabic stories, especially with Nasreddin, that how we should respect our elders and how that we should value wisdom from our past, like from our elders all, and how that's been passed on to us, and to keep that going. Even
Is,
like,
go ahead.
yeah, yeah, it's okay.
I was just gonna say, do you have an example of one that we might be familiar with? Are there
I
ones
can't
that,
think of it. Can't
okay.
think of anything top of
It,
my head. Sorry.
it's okay. Um, yeah, because when you're describing it, it sounds similar to me, like an Aesop fables. Are they short stories?
Yes, they are short stories.
Mm-hmm.
They are short stories.
Because the fable stories are generally stories that include animals, and there's always a moral at the end of the story. And so that's when you were talking about that, like I think the Lion and the Mouse is one where the uh mouse is, I don't remember what happens, but the lion rescues the mouse, and the mouse says, if someday I might be able to rescue you, and the lion laughs, but eventually he actually does need help, and the mouse and his little mice friends rescue the lion from a trap, I believe. I can't remember the full story, but that's basically the and then the moral of the story was friends can be small or big. They don't discriminate against friends or whatever the moral was. So is that kind of the type of stories that Nasruddin
Yeah,
stories
there
are?
is. And there are some with food as well. There's a story of Nasreddin that I remember with him catching a fish, and he wants to cook it, but just wants to share it, just wants to have it all to himself, but doesn't want to share it with his wife.
Mhm.
And so I like to add the twist of what happens towards the end. Does the fish get stolen by other people or by another animal? And just in a nutshell, is just sharing. Even if you don't want to share, sharing is caring, as the old saying goes.
Yeah, exactly. So one of the things that you're working on is doing evidence-based research on how the creative arts in different fields can help individuals and communities, right? So I think some of the examples you gave were dementia patients, and also dancing with Parkinson's disease. Can you talk a little bit about that, how storytelling and creative arts can be used practically?
Sure. So I finished my first half of my creative arts, health and well-being, and the creative arts is unbelievably amazing. It's just as an alternative way to help, for example, people living with dementia. So there's a program called BOMA, which is short for the Museum of Modern Day Arts, which started off in New York, that is a project to help Alzheimer's, people living with Alzheimer's, to make art accessible in art galleries.
Mm.
And the program was very successful, that other countries such as Britain and Canada and Australia and many countries in Europe took that on board to cater with people living with dementia and Alzheimer's. And there's another program called Dance for Parkinson's Disease, where now you have accredited dance therapists, which is called D&T, which helps with the psychological well-being of a person living with Parkinson's disease, to help them with their dance movements, to help with the muscles, and just as an alternative way to help slow down the cognitive process of people living with dementia. And I know that through academic research, there's a lot of people using storytelling. As you were saying, you're in Texas. There's a lot of research that's been conducted with Spanish, who speak Spanish as their first language, and they use storytelling to help young children and children to speak English, and how they can incorporate that in schools. And so the creative arts is absolutely amazing, and how they not just helping the older generation with unfortunate people, like with unfortunately things like Parkinson's disease and Alzheimer's disease, but it can be used in different outlets, and it's just beautiful how the creative arts can be used in that form.
Yeah, they're not just pretty to look at, but they have actual strong evidence to make life better for lots of individuals, whether they're suffering or they just want to have an enhanced life. Like with children, just having art in your life makes life better. And I feel like we've gotten away from that a lot in our society, because, when you go to school, they say you can't go into art because that's not a career. So I love that there are now evidence-based research that shows that arts do help in just more ways than aesthetically.
But as you said, we're told by teachers, and it's ironic, like that the art of storytelling is dying in the classroom, which you mentioned it beautifully, because you're losing that sense of language skills, that active listening, the reading. Now you've got 30, 40 students in a classroom, and where's that interaction of the art of storytelling? Where's the child's development? Where's the need to be catered to learn new skills, and to actually take the moment and to listen and to teach children? Because when you look at storytelling, you're not only looking at it from reading, writing, and speaking and active listening. As I told you earlier, you're losing organizational skills and presentation skills, the tone, the way you present yourself, how to say something, how to think of the next steps to say the story. But we also need to take into consideration that storytelling doesn't only help in an art perspective, but it also helps children in other subjects and other fields. And it's a skill. It's not just a lifelong skill through primary school and high school. We're not going to be in primary school and high school forever. It's a life skill, and we need to teach such life skills for children to take with them after they finish high school, and to take with them.
And I can imagine it would be very confidence building and resilience building.
Yes, absolutely. Exactly. Absolutely. Because when you build resilience and confidence in a child, you give them hope and possibility to hold on to that. As I was telling you with the newly arrived refugee and migrant children, I encourage them that they should honor their stories and be proud of where they come from and how far they've come. And PTSD and trauma doesn't go away. It stays with you. There will be days where you have your good days and your bad days. And trauma and PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, is not visible. We can't go up to every child and say, do you have X, Y, and Z? No, you can't do that. You need to be informed. And I think I was very lucky. I did a mental health first aid course, which helped me prepare in that situation to be informed. And through my current studies and working with domestic and family violence, I meet a lot of women and children who go through trauma. And when you create stories in that safe environment, some of the children come up to you and say, "Hey, I've gone through this. Thank you so much. You made me give you give me hope that someone like yourself, who's a first generation Australian, can speak Arabic, and you don't care if you stumble upon your words, because I've got a Lebanese twang to it. It doesn't sound like someone who was born in Lebanon."
Yeah.
But it gives them that, as I said, it gives them that superpower. And you want storytelling to be that strength and that superpower. And on those days where you just feel weak, you can always go back to that creating of the arts. For example, if the child used watercolors, they can take that home with them and they can look at that and say, "I did that with that storyteller, and I'm so proud of where I came from."
That's just so beautiful. At this point of the interview, we had a few technological issues, and so I asked Jasmine to send us her final thoughts, a few things that we didn't get to that we had intended to talk about during the recording of this beautiful episode. And so what you're hearing after this are those final thoughts.
Before I begin, I want to acknowledge the true custodians of this land and waters that I am speaking to you from, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are the original storytellers. I want to pay respect to their elders, past, present, and emerging, always was and always will be, and the original storytellers. The perfect example of a Nasreddin story is called Same Taste. So one day Nasreddin was coming back from a vineyard, was coming back from a vineyard, and he was riding on his donkey with 2 basketfuls of grapes. And children approached him and asked for some grapes. And so he gave each child one grape. And the children complained about wanting more, but Nasreddin said, "Makes no difference, they all have the same taste." And so from this story we can have multiple interpretations. So if the story is told to a young child, or say primary age, we can understand that you can't always have it your way. Some people like to share and some people don't, but at the same time, grapes have many symbolisms. So as we understand, one example of grapes could mean that health and relationship with people, health and prosperity. Grapes can also symbolize hospitality. It has many different interpretations, and the children who are listening to this Nasreddin story can take away their own interpretation from just as short folk tales and fairy tales. It's incredible that even still today that we can still use Nasreddin stories to help keep those stories alive and not to allow the art of storytelling to die.
Well, we were running out of time. So thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate you coming to tell us all about the beautiful work that you're doing.
No worries. And I just want to ask.
Feel free to follow me on any of my socials. So on YouTube, my YouTube channel is called Lebanese-Australian, and my website, Jasmine, JASMINEB for bob.com.au, and Instagram for storytelling programs for Lebanese-Australian. See you next time.
Thank you so much, folksy folks, for joining us on this creative arts bilingual storytelling journey. What did you learn today? Would you have considered storytelling a tool for working with refugees or dementia patients? What experience do you have telling stories to audiences in a in an oral storytelling fashion. We would love to hear from you. Podcasts are way more fun when they're interactive. We have a Facebook community page just for that. We post questions and we encourage our listeners to continue the conversation there. We also have other social media pages. So we have a Facebook page and a Facebook group. Instagram, we're on Twitter and LinkedIn as well. So you can find us wherever you are on social media. If you're enjoying our show, like I said before, make sure that you hit that subscribe button, whether you're watching on YouTube or you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, and share our show with your friends, with your bestie, with your mom, with your dad. Show them how to listen to podcasts. And if you have been listening for a while, consider giving us one of those 5-star reviews. They're so helpful for new podcasts like ourselves. Or indie podcasts. We're not so new anymore. And we love to hear from you. So you can also comment on YouTube if you are not on Facebook. There's lots of ways for you to get in contact with us, and we love hearing from you. Thanks so much for unraveling the mysteries of folklore. Once again, my name is Vanessa Y. Rogers. You've been listening to Fabric of Folklore podcast. And until next time, keep the folk alive.